you, everyone. Your
Okay,
patience.
so just a second, Doug. Doug, just wait a second. We just got the recording going now that you are on, and we've got Chris. Is Paul Knowles joining us as well?
Paul will not be, I don't think. He had something come up,
Okay.
but Chris Duff will be available and should be joining any second now as well, should his assistance be needed.
Okay, very good. Then I will start the meeting. It is now 2:08. It is, still Monday, January 24th, 2022, and we're still having technical issues. So I appreciate everybody's patience with us as we have gone through the day. As Scott said earlier, we lost power across the entire campus, county campus, and phones and internet. And so it's been fun already. But luckily, we at least can all be in our offices and Zoom in. So I'm not in the conference room at this point. We are starting off. Let me state that all three commissioners are in attendance. Our executive management team, we're joined by Doug Chase from County Parks and Chris Duff from the Spokane Indians. And Doug, I will now let you take it away.
Okay, and let's see if I have screen sharing capabilities. I can show the presentation, or Ron may have it all queued up as he does. There we go. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you, board. With the presentation here today in the work session, I'm hoping to provide a quick refresher of the recent changes in the world of major and minor league baseball, how these have affected the Spokane's Indians baseball team, our Spokane County Vista Stadium, the efforts and progress that we have made working towards identifying a path forward and progress made, as well as next steps and some action items, hopefully some decision points here today that will help us move forward and how we might address this. So with that, I'll have Ron move me to the next slide. So there we go, a little recap here. Steps completed to date, action items, next steps. So next slide. And as we get to those action items, as we work through this, we have two parallel tracks that we've separated out kind of our next steps in. The first looking at the big picture, discussing funding approach, funding amounts. And then secondly, we will chat a little bit about those next steps to get to shovel-ready projects and being ready to move forward. So again, next slide, please. Okay, little background here. I can't imagine, but it's pretty impressive. The Spokane Indians started playing ball back in 1903 here in the Spokane area. Vista Stadium was originally constructed back in 1958. Pretty impressive how solid it is. With the move from short season A to the high A season, the number of home games here has increased from 38 to 66. So that's quite substantial. As we look ahead to 2022 season, attendance is projected to exceed over 275,000 visitors this season. And again, the Spokane Indians employs over 300 part-time seasonal and 25 FTEs currently. And on our next slide, I will talk about the changes in Major League Baseball. So back in 2020, Major League Baseball implemented some huge changes across the entire league, with a reduction in the number of minor league teams from 160 down to 120. In 2021, Major League Baseball imposed new standards that apply to these remaining 120 teams that have to be met for the franchises to continue to operate. Spokane County hired ALSC architects to complete a stadium review and assessment, which we appreciate, to ensure compliance and basically to identify and analyze these changes as they would apply to our stadium, and estimate exactly what would need to be done, what type of costs may be involved moving forward to implement these requirements, And then just related to that, the way that Major League Baseball has rolled these out, if you will, all the stadium improvements, this list, if you will, need to be done not later than March of 2025. And then the minor league teams to help with this are required on an annual basis to demonstrate substantial progress towards reaching these standards by 2025. So all of this was taken into account as part of that study and identifying next steps forward that ALSC completed. Next slide, please. So we're now diving into and looking back in October last year. You may recall Rustin Hall with ALSC was kind enough to provide a nice presentation and overview of the study and the different improvements, which I have spread out between this slide and the next. We've looked at this from a phased approach, and those items highlighted demonstrate what has been done or is in progress. And more specifically, the Spokane Indians invested in a temporary field renovation to help with drainage of the field so that the field can be ready to go. They actually completed that this last fall, and that should be very, very helpful in the spring. And then Spokane County has invested in cross-connection control and weatherization projects that will allow our seasonal buildings over there, even with these, in some cases, temporary heat tape and such, it will allow us to energize the water in the spring and for the business and the various facilities to function in the spring that have otherwise been designed to work only during those summer months. And that construction is literally underway right now and moving forward. So we're really pleased with the progress that has taken place. So as we look at the next phase, you can see that those items listed there with the home clubhouse and several other projects. Next slide, please. And then we've, again, continuing on phase 3, phase 4, you can see the various time parameters there where we're targeting, again, in order to hit that goal, that deadline, if you will, of the 2025 season completion to have everything done. And you can see the estimated costs associated with these projects, which include everything from design to permitting and everything in between, are estimated at between roughly $20 and $23 million. And then we have a combination there on the right side, as you saw in the prior slide and this one. We were careful to identify those improvements through the study process that are specific to the Major League Baseball compliance only, and those others that may have been identified through the planning process that were logical to occur or otherwise desirable to occur as spectator amenities and could help with the business model combination. And so at the bottom there, you can see what that total looks like. If we were to subtract the spectator amenity projects, again, that just gives you an idea of what those costs have been estimated at. Next slide, please.
So Doug, I'm just going to ask a question quick. So
Sure.
The spectator amenity projects, so then you're saying that that's about 7 million? Is
Yes.
it the difference between the
Yes.
two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes. This when we pull the spectator amenity projects out, that's correct.
Okay, that takes us to the 16 million is still what's needed to meet the Major League Baseball standards.
Yes, that's what's needed to meet those standards and a few other master plan related type items as has been estimated.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so again, circling back to the funding item, we've identified a couple different options as we look at what may be involved in moving forward. And of course, one option is the no option, if you will, or no involvement, if desired. And the other would be here, Board of County Commissioners bring forward a ballot measure for public vote, funding with an increased property tax levy as another potential option for moving forward with these projects. And then in that sense, there's a few options there too. One could look at using that tool for the stadium improvements only, or look at those stadium improvements plus broader community recreational amenities, other projects, if you will, that have been done throughout the community or have been identified through planning efforts. And then again, as we consider this, we've put some additional information together with some help from our budget office. If we were to look at a 20-year option through this approach, through a ballot approach, and if we were to consider the 25 million, 50 million, or $100 million amounts for purposes of discussion, and assume that the amounts include all of the bond issuance and interest amount and such, we've got an idea here of what that could equate to in additional tax, if you will, for a home valued at $300,000. And so at the $25 million level, that would equate to $5.47. 50 million, $10.94, give or take, for again a home with 300 assessed value. And at $100 million bond amount, that would equate to about $21.88 per year for a home assessed at $300,000. And so maybe I'll stop at this point, and this might be a great spot to chat a little bit about which one of these options and some of the different ways that we could go with this at this point.
Commissioner French, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so Doug, I remember several years ago when we were talking about a similar opportunity for going to the voters, where we had either a single project with a cost or multiple projects across the county for a larger cost, but because it had greater appeal to more voters, we gave them more comprehensive package. And I can't remember, and I was hoping maybe you could, or maybe Casey might be able to weigh in here. At one time, I thought we were able to put two measures on the same ballot. One measure in the smaller dollar amount to cover the one project we were trying to fund, but a second ballot measure in a bigger amount that covered the smaller amount plus regional projects. And I don't remember the outcome of that conversation, whether it was deemed that we could do that or not. I mean, the assumption is if somebody wanted to go the bigger package and they voted for both the 25 million and the 50 million, that the 50 would prevail because 50 would include the 25. And so it gave them an option to say, we want more and are willing to pay more for the extra projects. But if they just wanted to fund a Vista Stadium, for instance, at 25 million, they could just check that box. And if that ended up being the one with the most votes, it won. So is my memory accurate, or was there some conversation that said we couldn't have two ballot proposals on the same ballot? Do you remember?
I don't remember, Commissioner, but I do know that there may be some issues with the subject and title rule. So we could do some further research if that's something the board would like
so
to do.
The option would be to have one ballot measure that says, would you be willing to spend $25 million for a Vista Stadium improvements, period. The other second ballot measure would say, would you be willing to spend 25 million for a Vista Stadium improvements plus another 25 for regional parks? And so that would be the second ballot measure. so that there would be a differentiation between the two options, and then the voters would have the ability to choose one or the other. So I
So it
think,
looks like
I think
Casey
you
vote-
avoid the double topic on the ballot measure that way.
We'll research the issue.
Okay,
And I guess I just checked with Doug to see if you have any recollection of that.
Yeah, I think we had some concerns whether that would be an option or not. And at this point, I'll just need to follow up with Casey to see what we can figure out. I think we're a little concerned that we might need to lean towards one option, but again, we can do that additional research if that would be helpful, and if that is a direction that the board would like to explore with the two options, if you will, versus one.
I mean, I think it's worth exploring to see if it's a viable option or not. I'm worried it might be confusing, but I mean, I think we need to know whether it's, a viable, whether it's even an option. When, Doug, when would this have to go? If we're going to be on, say, the August ballot, when would we have to have this finalized for the elections department?
I want to, I don't, let's see, the sheet of paper that tells me that exact date. Let's see if I can find it here. I want to say it was 6 to 8 weeks prior, and I will clarify that, but we're, yeah, looking at the August date, I will tentatively say 6 to 8 weeks prior is when a decision would need to be made and submitted for that to be placed on the August ballot. And I'm
Okay,
hopefully
I'm
being
thinking
very conservative.
But it might be even May. I mean, it's
Okay.
August 2nd is the ballot.
June, July.
And
Okay,
I think it's like, with filing week being the 16th through 20th of May, and I'm not sure those exact dates, but I think the 20th is the end. I think that's when we might have to have this ready to go if it
Okay.
was going to go on that August ballot.
great. And I'll verify that. Yeah, I apologize. I have many pieces of paper in front of me, but that particular one eluded me here this morning.
Commissioner Cooney,
Okay.
it is,
Just a second. Commissioner French has one more comment, and then I'll go to you, Scott.
well, actually, I was going to agree with you, Madam Chair, that I think it is the first part of May, because I think it's 90 days before the election and stuff. And so, but I think to be able to give this either option a fair hearing, I think sooner than later, because you've got to launch a campaign, you got to educate the public. And we all know how challenging it is to educate the public during the summer months when everybody is at the lake. So if we were going to make this an option for the voters, I'd really like to suggest that we do it sooner than later, so that we give the community adequate time to analyze what the options are.
And I think it have to be, yeah, I would agree, because it's either got to be on the August or November ballot, so it can get then onto the tax rolls if it were to pass, as well as to then let Vista Stadium, know construction timing and all of that. So those would definitely be that, August would be better than November from that perspective.
Well,
Scott, I saw you. Go ahead, Commissioner French.
Well, if it is the August ballot, then that's when they're still in season and there's all the excitement about baseball and so the public would be energized. If it goes on the November ballot, by that time, everybody's on the ski slope.
I would agree with you as well. Thank you. Scott, you wanted to speak.
Yes, I just, I found the document that Doug and I had received regarding the ballot deadline. And for the August 2nd election, it is May 13th. So you and Commissioner French were correct. It was in the May timeframe.
Okay, thank you. So that would be the target to, for that, but like Commissioner French was saying, I mean, just PR and all of that and getting out the information to the voting public would be sooner than that, as we know. So, okay, Doug, any other questions for Doug at this point? And then we'll let Doug proceed on his presentation. Scott.
Yeah, just some additional context. As Doug mentioned, these dollar amounts were really just for illustrative purposes, just to give you, during our conversations, there were some questions around what might be the impact on property taxes. So the 25 was really an Avista Stadium only. The 50 and 100 were just really then considering the scope of additional projects that might be added in. Nothing magical about that. And then it gives us an ease if it lands at, if you decide a Vista Stadium plus and it's 40 million or 80 million, it's a quick calculation for us. So this just gives you something to kind of digest.
Okay, and I think as we move forward, we're going to need to look at, if it's just the 25 or if it's going to be the 50, what are those projects? And I'm assuming, Doug, you'll have those, you have those probably readily available to determine what some of those are. Which, yeah. So we can talk about those later, but I'll let you proceed.
Thank you. Definitely headed in that direction. And again, for context, as you're looking at these amount, another thing I can share too, just again, to put in perspective, a rough estimate at that $25 million level is that roughly 18.5 million would actually be available for the capital improvements themselves once you were to remove the cost of the bonds and interest. So we're looking at roughly about 7.4 million available for capital spending for every 10 million that one might look at in a bond. And again, it's helpful for context as with whatever direction we might go forward and what we're considering trying to accomplish as we look at that. So, and I'll go ahead and advance to the next couple of slides. And so let's see if we can go to the next one. And again, here's a couple different things as we look at how the funding might occur, whether it's fully included within the bond or partially funded through the Spokane Indians. And this is specific to the Avista Stadium portion. And what I've looked at here, we've done a little bit of work and discussions more conceptually with the Spokane Indians and how it might look if all of the improvements, if you will, are rolled within a bond measure, or if we were to only include some of those improvements in the measure and look to the Spokane Indians to help fund some of those separately. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide where I try to put this in better context yet. So if as we look at, say, the next round or an updated future lease, we've again had some preliminary conversations. Our current lease as it exists today, right now, our lease payment or that's paid to the county is about is $24,500. If we look at that versus the budgeted expenses for 2022, after the lease payment has been taken into account, we're estimating about $147,700. And if you look at that over a 20-year period, you can see there's quite a significant ongoing investment. And as we look at some of the other options, the potential to improve what that lease payment is, looking at the next three lines there's a hypothetical of a zero investment, a 1.5 million investment, and a $3 million investment, and how that might translate into a future lease payment. If we're able to complete these improvements and roll those within the ballot measure approach, we believe that there's great potential to increase that annual lease payment that the county receives from $24,500 annually up to about $200,000, which could in fact provide a net gain annually. And of course, there's lots of different ways that could be used. And in this case for the slide, I just outlined what that might look like. There's no interest, there's no inflation. Again, this is purely a kind of a frozen point in time for purposes of kind of considering some of the different options as we go forward. And then if I jump, oh, go ahead.
Well, just a second. I see Commissioner French has a question, so he raised his hand.
So, Doug, the numbers that you're showing there for Spokane Indians baseball capital investment, are you saying that these numbers are just for illustrative purposes, or are you saying these numbers are the result of conversations you've had with the Indians baseball franchise?
I would say both.
Well, I would say these numbers are totally unrealistic in terms of, you know, you're going to pay 1.5 million and you get a $2 million return in terms of lease reduction and stuff. I mean, that's a hell of a return for them, and pretty crappy return from us, because it's going to cost us almost $1 million in operating losses. So that's why I was hoping that this was just for illustrative purposes and not really what you're suggesting for a proposed lease.
I think what the existing illustrates where we're at status quo, if no changes were to be made and if no additional investment of capital were to be made based on the current lease, we would be looking at investing. And again, our primary source that helps us with this is car rental tax. And we would be looking at investing $3 million at the expense of the county. And I guess the different scenarios show how we might greatly reduce that amount to the benefit of the county. So using the 1.5 million as an example, that looks at a favorable change, if you will, to the tune of $2 million to the county versus what today's snapshot is, as it exists today, without any improvements going forward. So we would actually, in that scenario, improve our situation to the tune of 2 million, where if we're able to fund all of these as part of the ballot measure, increase our lease payment up to 200,000 a year, again, for improving the stadium, we could potentially turn that negative 3 million into a net gain of 1 million. Again, and these are conversations that have taken place. So I may not have properly explained the chart before.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions before we move to the next slide? Okay, Scott. Oh, sorry.
Scott.
Thank you. Just some additional context here, and hopefully also addresses Commissioner French's question. The left column, the investment was as Doug mentioned, it was through some discussions with the Spokane Indians in terms of different scenarios where they felt like they could demonstrate some ability to invest in the dollars, knowing that we have a lease agreement that is outdated, and we do need to do some fine tuning going into the change in season, long seasons, additional operating expenses, etc. It made sense that we looked at it through both a straight up capital contribution as well as maybe a straight up lease change only, or a combination of both. So if you start with the $3 million that the Spokane Indians indicated that they could provide in capital contribution, and then compare that to, let's say there's zero capital contribution and we increase the lease payment $175,000 a year for those 20 years. This is not present value back or anything, but it basically gives $3.5 million over the 20 years, contributing towards the lease agreement versus the $3 million on a capital upfront cost. So yes, we'd have to do some PVing and just look at it, but on the surface, we just wanted to be able to provide that kind of simplified view of some different options, because we did feel like it was an opportunity to really take a look back at the lease agreement, make sure that we kind of level set it and reflects where we believe it needs to go into the future. But those are options, and certainly for consideration.
Commissioner Cooney, can I say something just real quick?
Yes, go ahead,
Okay,
Chris.
Yeah, just to echo what Scott said too. I think we were trying to come up with 3 different options. Our expectation is not to, continue with the current lease that we're under. We're understanding that we're leasing a facility right now that's 60+ years of age that needs significant upgrades, updates, improvements. If we're able to secure some funding to do some or all of these upgrades, our expectation is to contribute somehow, some way. And we're happy to do that on the front end from a capital standpoint. We're happy to do a blend of partial capital, partial rent increase, or we could look at the complete rent increase with no capital dollars on the front end, with the goal of being providing a sustainable business model, not only for the Indians, but hopefully a more sustainable business model for the county as well when it comes to the stadium. So that's really what we're looking at when we're looking at these numbers. But our expectation is absolutely to contribute, whether it's on the front end, whether it's a partial front end and with a lease increase or total lease increase. So that's absolutely our expectation here.
Thank you. Okay, Doug, I'll let you continue to move forward.
Okay. And I think I have one more slide, and this takes us to the discussion and to your point, Commissioner, on the different tasks. And one path forward could be, if you will, shall the Board of Spokane County Commissioners direct CEO Simmons to form and task a small committee to evaluate established needs for parks, athletic facilities, and improvements serving the greatest number of citizens across Spokane County, to come back with a package of improvements inclusive of the stadium for consideration of the board to bring forth to a vote of the community, not later than summer of 2022, meaning that August 2nd date. And again, this can be adjusted more specifically, but the thought here is we would in fact lean on the good planning that has been done, whether it be within the county or other jurisdictions under this guidance, if this is a direction that the board is comfortable tasking staff to move forward with.
Scott, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Cooney. This was kind of leading back to answering your question earlier, or beginning to answer it. It's how would if the commissioners were desirous of either a Evista Stadiums Plus package, or even the double approach that Commissioner French had mentioned, we need some way to inform on what those broader comprehensive asks are. And so the idea that Doug and I had batted around is constituting or standing up some sort of stakeholder committee or stakeholder group of folks in the community. It need to be manageably sized, but could leverage a lot of information that's already been gathered to date, planned for to date, and could come back with a list of projects that we think would be important to prioritize those. So it allows some sort of a stack ranking, and then determine how far down the list, there might be desire based on the cost of the projects as a whole. But this could be the step to begin informing on that and helping to prepare for a potential future voter ballot measure or measures.
Thank you. Any comments from Commissioner French or Commissioner Kearns? Can't see one of the commissioners, so I apologize. Looks like Commissioner French, you raised your hand. Thank you.
Yeah, so Doug, if for every 10 million, you get what, about 7.5 million in terms of construction dollars? Is that the
Yeah.
number?
Yeah, we're estimating 7.4.
So if what I got out of this was that the total cost to a Vista Stadium would be somewhere in the neighborhood of around 21,000 or 21 million. 2021, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, we're estimating between 20 and 23 for the full package.
So wouldn't that number on the bottom end really need to be 30 million instead of 25? Otherwise, you're still going to end up short.
It would need to be fine tuned for that stadium only package, definitely. And I think the amounts, again, help us with that discussion and for that next step going forward. But correct.
So the numbers really are 30 and 60 million as opposed to 25 and 50, which is fine. And so is there, Mr. Simmons, is there any chance that you could have a proposal back to the board like in the first part of April as opposed to summer? Because the latest we're going to be able to have to go out to the voters is May 13th. And it'd be nice to have the board have some time to noodle whatever your results are prior to putting that on the ballot and stuff. Is that possible? I know it's not realistic, but I'm asking, is it possible?
I think now that we're having the conversation right now is really important, getting some direction. I think we will work hard to have something back to you because we know that you'll want to have some noodle time and some input into the approach. So we would certainly work towards that. And I think with the not everything that may come up will have had plans around it, but we feel like there's quite a few things that have had a lot of discussions already. If you look across the county and jurisdictions, different ideas and different planning processes that have happened. So I don't believe at all we're starting with a blank sheet of paper here. So that would be our intent, is to start engaging right away and setting that up. And then to the 25 million number, Commissioner French, that was on me. I threw out 25, 50, and 100. And Doug did some great work over the weekend in finding out for every 10 million how much was available. So you are absolutely correct. We need to bump it up to 30 on the bottom.
Because that would be my comment as well. I'd want to make sure that that number is all in for all the items that need to occur for a Vista Stadium, because the last thing I want to do is have us, remodel, make these changes and then go, oh, we need to spend another $2 million here. It's like, I want to make sure that that number is all inclusive of everything. So that way, we can go to the voters and let them know that that is all inclusive, for that number. I would suggest, I like Commissioner French's idea too on, having it by the 1st of April, but we are actually out that first week of April. So I'm going to say March 28th, which I know is really pushing it, but that would give us that, that's the Monday before we would break for the spring break week. Because I think, waiting until even the 11th of April is going to be, challenging then to start to really move forward with, what all needs to happen for a ballot measure.
You charter us and we will begin to accomplish.
Now, which is great why we're thinking through it all here, so that way we make sure we're all on the same page, that, to meet that, to really have those hard dates on May 13th. And then, I know you work on that first week of April, I think you guys do have a lot. I mean, I've heard from a lot of community members that there's a lot of needs for youth, fields out there. So I think there's people out there that can help, inform on that. So I think it's great that we're having the conversation to really nail down these dates. Commissioner Kearns, do you have any comments?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. So Commissioner French, you're the vice chair. Do we need a motion or just a head nod for the team to move forward and come back with a proposal?
I think they've got the sense of where we want. Now it's a matter of just coming back with recommendations and for the board's consideration and stuff. And then the only other guidance I would offer is that with that extra 30 million, not all of that has to be spent in the West Plains. So feel free to share that with the other. I'm just kidding, kind of.
Maybe, sort of.
Maybe. Not
Yeah,
really.
I think we certainly we got the direction. We understand that's where you want us to focus at, with a target of having something back to you at the end of March, and we will do that, and we will do some reach outs, and if there's maybe we'll reach back out to you individually if there's some individuals that you think will be important to have on this group to help to develop a good stakeholder list.
And I would suggest, Scott, that you can, on the legal question for the ballot, if we can have just the stadium versus the stadium plus on the ballot at the same time, if as soon as that is determined, if you can just inform us about that right away.
Will do. We understand the ask and what you're looking for.
Very good. Doug, do you need anything else from us?
Yes, we're halfway there, Commissioner. Thank you very much. Although I have just a small handful of slides to cover the parallel track item, if you will, related to this. So if Ron can take me to my next slide, I'll try to wrap up here. And if you recall, we had those two critical path items on a parallel track, if you will. And that's looking ahead as we look at those timeframes, deadlines and guidelines in order to be shovel ready, to be ready to go in anticipation of an August 2nd ballot measure timeframe. There's work that we need to do to prepare those bid documents so that we can be in a position to go out to bid and meet those target timeframes and utilize that very small construction window in the off season when baseball wraps up. And so with that, we've identified for the next phase, if you will, timing steps, funding, RFQ. So next slide, please. We've worked with an architect to help us understand what a timeline might look like to accomplish this. And so what we've identified, basically the architect, they had a different path in that perfect world where we started 2 weeks ago. But we believe we have a very realistic timeline here that should we commence immediately with our RFQ process, we believe with reasonable confidence that we can have that bid package underway and completed just in time to align with that ballot measure in August. So next slide, please. However, to accomplish that, we would need funding short-term, immediately, if you will, to be able to move forward with the next phase of design. Now, as I understand it, these funds, should you authorize, approve, and have me move forward with this, they would be eligible to be reimbursed by the ballot measure. So I would describe it in terms I understand as I guess somewhat of an advance, if you will. If the ballot measure is successful, we could utilize those to backfill and reimburse the county, if you will, for this investment. On the other hand, again, we know as a ballot measure, there is no guarantee whether that measure will be approved or not. So it would be an investment made with that risk, but it does enable us. It's really the only way we can remain on that timeline and be able to accomplish everything that we hope the community will want us to. And so specifically, we've identified an amount of funding here to the tune of $450,000 that would certainly allow us to move forward. And the first step would be to go through the RFQ process and formally select an architect to complete. And they would be selected to complete the various design documents for the Avista Stadium, beginning with this first phase of projects for phase 2. And I think one more slide, please. And this is my last slide. And so what I am hopeful for, board, is that I guess the question before I would like to present is, shall the board authorize funding in the amount of $450,000 and direct CEO Simmons to commence with an RFQ process to select the most qualified firm to complete the architectural and engineering documents for Avista Stadium improvements, beginning with phase 2, in preparation of going out to bid summer of 2022 if the ballot measure is approved. And so that's the request that I have before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions specific to the projects, timeline, or other.
So I guess I'll let my fellow commissioners go, or I've got some questions.
Okay.
Commissioner
So-
Prince, you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
Sure. No, I'll go ahead, jump in here. So concerns on 2 levels. One, if we have, as a board, already allocated $450,000 for the purposes of doing preliminary design and stuff, and I understand that from a construction standpoint, you need to get the documents done so you can get out to bid and under construction. I'm worried that the message we send to the voters is, well, we don't really care what you say. We're moving forward, and we're already spending this kind of money to make the improvements to the stadium. And so that could have very much a negative reaction for the voters. You know, I look at, the dialogue that's gone on in the community around the stadium downtown and Albee Stadium, and, did you listen to the voters, and on and on. And I don't want to get trapped in that kind of dialogue, even though it has nothing to do with our intent. We're just trying to recognize the construction seasons, but the messaging would be challenging from a campaign standpoint. The other part of it is that the only dollars at risk in this are county dollars, county taxpayer dollars. And it seems to me that if we are in a partnership with Brett, that maybe that $450,000 mark should be split between the Indians and the county, so that we're both sharing in the risk, we're both sharing in the rewards. And of course, if the ballot measure passes, we both get reimbursed. If the ballot measure doesn't pass, at least the taxpayers aren't out for the full dollar amount, speculating on behalf of the Spokane Indians. So my 2 observations for what they're worth.
Thank you. I know for me, one of my thoughts is again, hard to, kind of front the money when we don't know what's happening. Is there a way to look at alternative bid procedures that's, doing like a design build? I know that there's potential for that, and I guess I would like to make sure that we've looked into that and thought about that, if that could change the timing for us, as well as I think it's, I would like to look at our valley partners the city of Spokane Valley, because I would like to see what the economic impact is for them. This is within the city of Spokane Valley, going from short season to long season. What's that economic impact for them? And maybe they would want to participate in, if we do need to front some of these costs. Any comments, Commissioner Kearns, or are you good?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, so I mean, we're throwing out the $25 million number, but it's actually gonna have to be at least 30. And Mr. Duff, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. If this is a question if you can't answer, I understand. But so the highest number that we've seen of a potential for the Indians ball club at contributing is about 3 million. So about 10% of the cost. I mean, is that your ceiling? Or are you willing to potentially go higher? I mean, because essentially we're looking at a 90-10 split versus the primary user of the facility to the taxpayers. I mean,
Absolutely. No, I think it's a very fair question. And, those numbers came from math that we have done going from short season to long season. Obviously, our revenues are going to increase. So our intent is to, take some of the revenues that we're receiving going from short season to long season, put it back into the facility. And doing that math, what we're trying to do is get back to a similar business to what we were in 2019. And the $3 million contribution or the $200,000 contribution doesn't quite get us there. So I'm not ready to say, yes, that's our ceiling for sure, but that's about where we need to land in order to continue being a sustainable business. But I think that's open for conversation. I know there's some additional splits that we do on the operating side too. So I don't want to say, yes, that's our ceiling for sure, but that's about where we need to land would be my answer.
Okay. And I'll be the first one to say I am by no means an expert or understand the model between MLB and minor league, but I mean, you're a developmental team for the Rockies. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Are the Rockies willing to pony up any type of money? I mean, to support essentially their entity that you operate under. Are they willing to come to the table with any dollars?
Also a fair question, one that I have myself as well. And the answer is, I don't know yet. I think that that's a question that we need to ask as we go through this process. I think that we need to make a connection between the Board of County Commissioners and the Colorado Rockies. That's a new partner that we have brought to Spokane that I think you need to get a chance to meet as well. So I think that dialogue is open. I don't know that they're, have their checkbook ready and open and ready to contribute to this, but I think that's a fair question that we as a group, the Spokane Indians, also along with Spokane County, I think we need to go down that path and ask those questions.
Okay. And I believe there was it Hillsborough and Eugene that are either building new facilities or renovating existing facilities? Do you know what the finance mechanism they did? Is it public? Is it private? Is it a combination? Are there other sponsorship opportunities that either of those communities use to fund?
I like your questions. They're good. There's 120 teams across minor league baseball now, and you brought up two examples there that happen to be in our league, and they're both going through similar situations. Eugene is looking at a brand new facility. Hillsborough is looking at significant upgrades to their current facility. I would say within all 120, each situation is slightly different. Almost all of them are some type of combination of public and private. I know Hillsborough has a lodging tax that they're planning to use for quite a bit of what they're looking to do. I know that Eugene is looking at doing some private dollars, but it goes to rent credit over a 30-year span. So they basically have no rent for 30 years. So there's really all different ways that people are tackling this challenge. So there's not really one model that's made sense for everybody, but it's, what we threw out today is through conversations with Scott and Doug, it seemed like it, again, was, provided the Indians an opportunity to be a sustainable business in that long season model, also put the county in a better financial position as well, and then brought the community, a vastly upgraded facility to enjoy. So that's why we went down the path that we did. We don't have to continue down that path. We're open to other opportunities as well, but that was the one that seemed to make the most sense in our conversations.
Okay. And I guess, so then my next question would probably be for Doug. I mean, Doug, have we looked at any type of other types of alternative funding mechanisms? I mean, that other communities have done that are kind of innovative? I mean, I'm not throwing out any ideas. I don't have any right off the top of my head, but are there any other communities that did something that's sort of thinking outside the box rather than just going straight to a ballot measure and having it footed primarily by the taxpayers? Did any other communities do anything interesting?
What I've found so far is communities that have gone the route of primarily a ballot measure to help fund and invest in the community stadium. So I'm continuing to look and trying to reach out, but at this point, that seems to be the most common approach that I've run into to date.
Do we know what the
And-
success rate has been? I mean, are communities saying yes, or are communities primarily saying no?
Well, I know in general, when we looked at the last time I really looked more specifically at ballot measure and success rate, park ballot measures have done very, very well historically across the state. The last several cycles that they've been out there, very, very well. And so I think that has a lot to do with why that has been the preferred route that municipalities and counties have looked at. They've just had a lot of success when properly communicated to the community. That, again, just what I've observed across the state, communities seem to be very supportive of that, and we've seen some examples of that locally here in Spokane with Riverfront Park and a few other improvements. So
Okay.
those two
Maybe
seem to align.
Maybe I'll phrase the question a little different. Of the 120 communities that need to upgrade or replace their stadiums, of those communities that have gone to the ballot for that, any idea, have those been successful so far, or have they not been successful?
I think a lot of them are in progress right now. Most of them, quite frankly, don't have as much work to do to the stadiums that we do to be able to reach that standard that Major League Baseball has set. So in our case, we probably are number one on the list for that greatest need of improvement of the 120. So I'm happy to research that. I don't have a specific number to share with you. I don't know if Chris has a sense of that, but I think those similar to Spokane County that have, I guess, a greater gap to address are in the process of lining up similar measures.
Okay. All right.
Looking
Thank you.
ahead. Mhm.
Commissioner French, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. You know, when you look at what the PFD and the Spokane Public Schools did with regard to the soccer stadium, I mean, it's slightly over $30 million in terms of cost. And yet I think USL is bringing $5 million to the table and paying rent for the facility and stuff. And so here we're looking at about the same dollar amount and getting less in the contribution and less in terms of rent. And so I'm really concerned about the public saying, well, you guys just didn't do your job. You didn't negotiate a good deal. Why is it that the stadium has a greater participation than Avista does and stuff? So, you know, again, it's about public perception and how it affects the potential for a ballot measure to be successful and stuff. So it'd be interesting to see if we could somehow get closer to the numbers that the stadium was able to generate. Thank you.
Chris, because I know as we went, Major League Baseball went from 160 to 120 teams. There were certainly some areas that thought they were going to have a team, certainly some areas that had teams that don't have teams any longer. Can you speak to some of those larger markets that are now not having teams?
Yeah, there was actually, so we went from 160 to 120, and actually 43 minor league baseball teams got eliminated. 3 independent teams were brought in to backfill some of those. And, there are, of the 43 that were eliminated, there are less than half right now that are playing. They're playing some type of college wood bat, a much lower level. There are 12 to 15 that are simply, sitting vacant facility wise. There's no users of the facility anymore. And, I think we've got a challenge, as Doug talked about too. I think that we are now one of the oldest facilities in the 120 minor league baseball teams left. The older facilities were part of that elimination of the 43 teams. So I think that does put a challenge in front of us, no doubt. I think the county should be commended. I mean, we do have a 60-plus-year-old facility that has great bones. I think it's great news that we went through this process with ALSC and we found out that the right move would be to invest in the current facility. And going to Commissioner Kern's question as well about what's working for other teams that are going through this. They're not quite to the level that we are, as far as the needs to their current facility. The reason they're not is because they've gone to, the public and they've built new facilities in the last 60 years. A lot of them have built new facilities in the last 15 to 20 years. So I do think that we're in a really good position and a unique position, have an opportunity in front of us, going from short season, 38 home games, going to a long season of 66 home games. And we have a facility that's close to working. We just need to invest in that facility. We're not looking to build a brand new facility. So, I kind of look at it as, getting a long season team for an investment of, we'll say $25 to $30 million into a facility versus what some of these other markets have had to do when they're investing 60, 70, $80 million into a facility. I think the county should be commended for us being in this position as well and being able to maintain a stadium for 60 plus years. But there are a lot that are currently sitting out there vacant. And, it is really important to Major League Baseball that the player development component improves through this process. And that means better workout facilities. It means better travel, which is operational expense for us. That means better housing, which is operational expense for us. So, part of this whole agreement with Major League Baseball is not just what we're seeing in these capital investments. There are operational expenses that the team is incurring that are significant. And we're doing 2 buses, 3 buses instead of 1 bus. We're doing 1 guy to a hotel room instead of 2 people to a hotel room. So that player development component, I want to make sure that we all understand is really important to Major League Baseball. And that's what they're looking at, is the facility, how good is it for their players and as they develop. And they've shown that's where the priority is. And, if we don't meet the standards, I'm worried that we're going to have a facility that, we may be looking for other uses.
Thank you. So, Scott.
I wanted to circle back to something Commissioner French raised earlier on the cost for the design estimate. Doug, you had shared kind of your evaluation of this, a certain amount, while 450 would be the entire need for the design, it would also include costs down the road that may be incurred, but may be incurred at a later time. So could you share with the commissioners of the 450, how much we believe is needed to perform on the design work necessary to meet a construction commencement of September?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. The 450, as Scott mentioned, that would include design and construction management in that. I believe, and again, this is an estimate from one firm, so being conservative went with that full package amount. We absolutely have the potential to negotiate that back to the design only and phase in the construction side of it once we reach that point. That could help reduce that number by approximately 20 to 25%. And again, it's an estimate from one firm, not having gone through that RFQ process. So we might whittle that number down to 300 to 340,000. Let's see, to roughly 300 to 340,000. Best case scenario, maybe what's needed to do just the design only if we again pull out the construction oversight and construction management. So there is that opportunity too.
And then,
So sorry.
go ahead, Commissioner Kenny.
Well, I was just gonna try to wrap this up, just because based on your ask, if we're ready to have you move forward, I don't think we're quite ready to move forward yet on that last question, and starting the RFQ process. I think based on what I'm hearing today is that, we've got some further questions before we commit to $450,000. Because once you go out for that RFQ process, I mean, I think we're kind of saying we've committed to those dollars. And so I think there's some further questions to get answered before we move on that. I know you're trying to move on it quickly, but is there a way for my two commissioners, okay, if they come back next week to just have the discussion on that piece of it, or is a week enough time? Because
I'm
I
fine
know
with
I'm
that.
not ready to make that decision today.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would rather have them come back at a later date if next week is what we have to do, and if we can get that work done between, over the next 7 days. I mean, I'm comfortable with that.
I think what I heard, Commissioner CUNY had raised some questions around some different methods of delivery. We can chat more about that. And I believe Commissioner French had raised, and maybe you're feeling the same way, as somehow a cost sharing strategy as it relates to the design work with the Spokane Indians group.
And I think I would like us to also have a discussion with the city of Spokane Valley, because this is
Yes.
an economic impact, I think, to them if the stadium were not to happen.
Thank you. I think on the alternative design approach, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I've been encouraging our teams across the county to expand our utilization of other alternative methods of delivering construction. There is a process that we would have to go through with the state to receive approval, and that's can be a lengthy process. It's a good one for us to do, because it does provide different mechanisms for us to address construction, whether it's for parks and facilities. It's also can be used in our public works area as well. But we probably do not have the time afforded to us, at least for this phase, but certainly future phases, should a ballot measure be successful, that's the direction you want to go, is certainly something we could look at.
So I guess to that extent, Scott, I would ask you to reach out to Vicki Carter with the Conservation District, because they did do the alternative procedure for the building that they're building on their place. And when I've talked to her, she said it was not as cumbersome as what I've been led to believe, that it was actually a pretty smooth process and worked really well. So, I mean, that's why I guess I just would like to, have some further inquiries that way to see what, is this a bigger dollar amount? Does that put it in a different category? That I don't know, but I would just like to at least have that knowledge as we move forward.
Agreed. Okay, got it. Good call out.
Okay. So
Hey,
I think, yeah,
thank
I've got
you.
some tasks ahead of me, and we'll look forward to a week from today and having some additional information to help with this topic and revisit it. If I understand, that will be the next step.
Yes, it'll be either on Monday or Tuesday afternoon, because our mornings will be busy with the health district. So,
Perfect.
so thank you very much. I'm sure if there's any other questions, Scott can, get further clarification from any of the commissioners that he needs to.
Great. Thank you very much.
Chris, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you being on and helping answer questions as well today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's attention to this, and obviously understanding of the urgency that we have in front of us. It is a tall task, as I mentioned earlier, but I do think it's one that's really important to our community. So I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Great. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is Pat Farrell and Casey Evans on IT cybersecurity. So Casey, I'm going to check with you, just because now that I'm in my room and I'm not in the conference room, to do an executive session is kind of crazy. So
Oh, yeah,
is
no,
this, is it
no executive session.
no executive session? Okay, very good. I was kind of told it might be, so I wanted to check. Okay, perfect. Then we will have the two of you. We will be now joined by Casey Evans as helping represent IT department as well, sharing multiple hats today.
Yeah, very busy.
Pat Farrell from IT, and then I see Justin Roach. Are you from IT as well?
I am, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. I apologize, Justin. I don't know that you and I have met in person yet. Still all over Zoom. So,
Justin is our
appreciate you
information
being
security
here.
manager.
Okay, very good.
And
Thank
I think
you.
Ron has a PowerPoint I sent his way. All right, thanks, Ron.
Okay,
So
then
good
I did see
afternoon,
Becky Garrett join us.
commissioners. Can you hear me okay? Hello.
Yes, I apologize, Pat. I just do want to just identify that Becky Garrett joined us as well, our director of
Okay.
IT.
All right, good afternoon, commissioners. Today, what we'd like to do is give you just a very brief overview of where we're at, where IT is at with our IT security program, and discuss some new policies and standards that we want to present to you for approval. Go ahead and hit the enter key, Ron. So, I'm gonna move this thing out of the way. This is our purpose statement for our IT information security program, and the purpose of the program is to develop and implement an IT security framework that ensures confidentiality, integrity, compliance, and available of Spokane County information assets. Go ahead and hit enter, Ron. And to support the program, we focused on the following 6 components. The first 3 there, the prevention and detection, auditing, and monitoring and access management, are all technology-based components. And they are made up of kind of a very boring alphabet soup of technologies that we won't go into right now. And we call this our security onion. And there's many layers to our security onion. We continue to add procedures and technologies to that security onion as to adapt to ever evolving IT security threats. The next 3 elements are policy based, and that's what we'd like to review with you today. Acceptable use policy, otherwise known as an AUP, incident response plan, as an IRP, and a standards compliance. These are all policy based pieces to the puzzle here. And this process actually started back in 2019, this development, when we engaged with a vendor to assist us in creating these policies and the incident response plan and the standards manual. And we got started and spun up with this vendor, and then COVID hit and the project stalled out. And then when we got back on track with the vendor and they delivered their first work product to us, well, we were disappointed, to say the least. The long story short is that after a lot of back and forth with the vendor, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, and our continued dissatisfaction with their work product, with Casey's help, we ended up terminating the contract with the vendor. So between policies that Justin had gathered up from other state, federal, local agencies, salvaging some of what the vendor provided to us, and various policies that we received from King County, we put together what we want to present to you today. So next slide, Ron. So basically, we have 3 new policies here we want to present for approval at your next consent agenda meeting on February 2nd. The acceptable use policy, it applies to all employees, and it replaces and, more importantly, updates 3 existing county policies. The ones that are listed there: 446, use of county social media; 447, personal use of social media; and 724, internet usage. So that's number 1. Number 2, the incident response plan policy. The incident response policy applies to information security incidents, and it formally authorizes the IT security program and the incident response plan. And the incident response plan is it's a 40-page manual we put together that's based on multiple National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, standards and provides guidance for us to respond to various information security incidents. And then number 3, the IT security policy applies to all employees, and it authorizes and supports the IT security standards manual. A standards manual is another, it's a large 80-page manual that documents standards of IT security practices and includes guidance for day-to-day operations of the county network. And all of the standards that are in this manual were from policies that we received from King County. So they're all heavily based on policies that were adopted by King County. And all 3 of these policies, 1, 2, 3, have been reviewed by Casey Evans, who's online with us here, and Ashley Cameron and Gary Petrovich. So they've received them all, reviewed them, made some tweaks, and Casey and Justin and I have spent a lot of time putting these 3 policies together. So it's been it took a village on this one, but I think we got it done. So the 3 new policies, again, they're on your February 2nd consent agenda, and we're requesting that you approve them at that time and open for any questions you might have.
Okay, oh, I got everybody back on screen. Is there any questions for Pat? Commissioner Kearns.
Can we get the actual text of the policies?
I believe you're provided with the 3 policies. That was the plan anyway.
I don't have them. I was provided your slides that you just had up on the slide, but I don't have the text of what the policy updates are.
Casey, didn't those come over with the resolution?
And you said, well, I mean, you said February 2nd. So I mean, we've got a week to review.
Yeah, we can certainly get them to you right after this meeting.
Send those to, I mean, Commissioner French, CUNY, have you seen a red line version or anything of them?
I have not. So yeah, so Pat,
either.
if you could send those out to all 3 of us, that'd be great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And you may have gotten them to Gina and we just didn't all get them yet. So we'll make sure we all have them. That would be great. So I know going through policies and procedures, it's not always fun and easy. So thank you all very much for doing that. I guess, for me, kind of the main thing is like, is just having the chance to take a look at them ourselves and see if we have any questions or concerns too. And then if we need to, we can, if anyone does, they can reach out to you directly, I think. Commissioner Kearns.
I was just going to say, I just got a Teams message. Gina does not have them either. So I don't know if there's a breakdown somewhere in communication, but I don't think they've made it to our office yet.
Pat, if you could just email them out to everybody.
I will do that.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we look forward to seeing those and taking a look at those before the February meeting on it. Okay, thank you for joining us today. With that, then I'm going to move to item number 3, Jeff McMorris to talk about ARP planning update.
There we go. Okay. We go in here. So before we get talking about some specific categories, just a couple kind of housekeeping items and questions for the board. The first is around community feedback for ARP. You guys are all aware of the survey we had or still have that's ongoing, that's collecting very broad ranging information, just which categories do you think would be best? We don't have any online form to collect specific ideas for just a specific project. During the CARES funding, the county did have up a web link that you could go to put in, the name of your project, the total cost, the amount you are requesting of CARES dollars, just collecting information and ideas in a standardized way. One of the most common questions we are receiving is how people can submit an idea for a specific project. And right now, I'm collecting some, you guys are forwarding me some. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on actually having a link on a web page. We would just kind of adapt the CARES page to change it to the ARP criteria and get your guys' thoughts on doing that. I think the potential downside is people might think they're actually applying for funds. We have to make it very clear, this is not an application, it's not a pre-application, it's a idea submission form. The positive side would, we could dump everything into a dashboard, quickly look through ideas, and you guys could use it to reference when you're deciding how you want to put the funding into different category buckets.
Okay, Commissioner French or Kearns, any comments or thoughts?
I mean, I like the idea of having a portal or a place where folks, if they want to send an idea, and because yeah, I have gotten a lot of I know a lot of them are sent to all three of us, and I forward them on. I've just been forwarding them on because I don't know if the two of you are. There's others where I'm the only recipient in the 2 line, so I forward them on. But I mean, there's always a possibility I miss one, or I don't forward it on. So I mean, if there is a place to send folks, but I just think we just need to make it very abundantly clear that this is not the RFP. This is not an official request. This is a way to sort of float an idea, but you are not actually applying. I think there would be benefit to that. I fully expect the 3 of us are all still going to receive emails with these, but it would be nice if there was a place for, maybe a few of those go directly to Jeff, and just maybe minimize the potential for one of those asks getting lost or concepts getting lost.
Thank you, Commissioner French. I see you came on, your video's on.
Yeah, so I know that there was a lot of folks with ideas that I know that I'd received prior to the guidance coming out from the feds. And now that we've got the guidance, some of those ideas might have some merit, others don't meet the threshold and stuff. So I continue to be open to input for different ways to invest these dollars. As I indicated at the Council of Government meeting, there are some expenditures that I would like to advocate for, and so when we get to that point, I'd like to be able to put those formally on the table for the board consideration. But at this point, open to additional ideas.
Yeah, I think I'm, obviously this is a process and we're not finished with the process. So having those ideas come forward is great. I think having a central repository that we can all then say, like Commissioner Kearns was saying, as we get these, we can forward them, but then we can also send a link saying, here's where you go to fill out the form. So that way they're just all the same and they're answering the questions the same, to at least present ideas, to us. So that way then they can get vetted as to whether they're even legitimate ideas based on the guidance or not. And then people, that response can get back to them to let them know. So I like the idea of having kind of a central repository for that, similar to what we did for CARES, and that way they're answering kind of similar questions that we know will meet, allow us the ability to have somebody make the decision if it's allowable or not, to even start that process.
Okay, so we will work on that, of course, bring it back to the board before anything would be posted. And again, yes, I expect we'll have our first plan passed, hopefully within the next month. But it won't be the full 101 million. So we'll be collecting additional ideas as we go, even after you guys have your first round of priorities. The second issue, just kind of an FYI, there were a few items that you guys discussed last fall in your regular county budget process, and they were tossed out as options that might fit, could be possible for ARP dollars. One of those was the 1/3 of the lease payment at the Spokane Resource Center. Because you guys have approved that, and my understanding is the contract has been signed and it happened in 2021, because we don't have a plan in place at this point, and we have to submit by next Monday. There's quarterly reports that go to Treasury in addition to the annual report. So we have to submit the report by next Monday for the fourth quarter of last calendar year. So while I still believe the Spokane resource lease payment does qualify, due to timelines, that particular payment is not going to qualify. So it can be paid for out of just general fund dollars. Other items you talked about would still be on the table because the timelines aren't conflicting. So that's just kind of an FYI on the Spokane resource. Is a $75,000-$80,000 1/3 lease payment split with the city and workforce council. Any questions on that before we move forward? Okay, next is revenue replacement. Jason Link in the budget office has crunched the numbers. The formula did change slightly with the final rules that came out a couple weeks ago. The big factor that's impacting our number is the tentative rules had a 4.1% annual increase assumed would be your normal rate of increase. That was increased to 5.2%. So an extra 1.1 on your assumed kind of COLA for your own revenues. In Washington State, with the 1% property tax cap and our sales tax, at least our rate of sales tax, we don't expect to see any major changes. We don't go up by 5.2% a year. So when you factor that in, you guys have heard about the 4.86 million, which was our original calculation. That has increased significantly to 9.38 million. So just shy of doubling. That is for 2020. So that's using 2019 as the base year. That'd be the 2020. They believe, budget office believes we'll have enough information in March to get a tentative number from the 21 calendar year to impact the 22 budget. And then those numbers probably won't be final until May. But the expectation is the second year will be somewhat similar, possibly up to another $9 million, give or take, just based on what they know at this point. And then, of course, we get there's 4 years total, 2020, 21, 22, 23, to impact the 24 budget in the last year. One of the first questions that need to be answered when we put out the first plan by resolution for a vote is, do you want to take the $10 million standard deduction that goes to general fund to replace revenue lost during the pandemic? Or do you want to use this formula, which at this point, Jason is going to do some extra double checking this week just to confirm the numbers. But it appears at this point, the first 2 years is going to be 15, 20 million, a bigger number. The advantage of using the bigger number, any of your revenue replacement goes to the general fund. It can be used for additional items beyond the 60 subcategories. And generally speaking, you have a lot less staff time and reporting. So that saves those revenues to actually be used on the street for the purposes versus paying staff to write papers about them and send it to the US Treasury. So with that information, which direction would you guys like us to put into the first plan, either the $10 million standard deduction or the what we expect to be significantly larger formulaic for revenue replacement dollars.
So and Commissioner French, before you go, so Jeff, Randy Bischoff gave me a call. I think the second year is going to be a little less than they anticipated because the sales tax percentage is higher. So, I think we need to wait for, Jason to really figure that out as he looks at it. But I'm going to be in favor of looking at using the formula. I think then those dollars become more usable for the future. Commissioner French?
Yeah, I would agree. I would rather go with the formula than the 10 million cap. Even if it's less for 2021 and 22, it's going to be, it just has to be what, $62,000, $620,000 more than this year. And you cap the $10 million cap. So, and we're going to be well above that and stuff. So I would be in favor of the formula approach.
I agree. I think we would want to use the formulaic the formulaic approach. At the end of the day, this is all about using these dollars to benefit our community. And if we can find a way to get more flexibility in how to use those dollars, we may be able to help our community in a way that we wouldn't if we, with some of the dollars, if we just use the $10 million cap.
Okay, so we will start drafting based on formula, of course, until you take the vote. If we get updated information, we will bring it forward to the board. One thing, just to be very clear, while we can change and amend our overall plan throughout the 5-year duration of ARP spending, once you select the 10 million or the formulaic, you may not change your mind on that. That is a one-time choice that you are locked into once you vote on the first iteration of your plan. Next category. Oh, sorry.
Jeff, before you go. So, I think it's going to be important to really have some solid numbers because we need to get a plan and we need to check a box soon. So
Jason Link said he will dig in a bit deeper this week, and hopefully we will have either confirm these numbers or have some better thought even by next week. We won't know everything, of course, because we'll be a few months before we know 2021 for sure.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
The next box, so we have the 5 public facing categories that we usually talk to the public about, and that's what our survey covers, but we do have these 2 internal categories we need to get in place. So revenue replacements, the one we just discussed. Then there's the administrative cost of administering the ARP. So one of the choices that the board has is, do you guys want people like our grants, Heather and Erica in the grants office, some of the budget staff, finance team, some of my own time, we can do the time and effort certifications and bill some of our salary and benefit package to ARP versus a general fund. So that's also a way that would free up additional general fund resources if we are being paid for our ARP work through ARP. And then there are also the possibility of needing to do some IT upgrades or purchases to help administer ARP. Those would also have the side benefit of helping into the future with other grants. Do you guys, if you're ready to make a decision or not, but what are your thoughts on charging to admin those sorts of fees? If you want to, we'll start putting some numbers around them to bring to you to look at in the following weeks.
I guess I'll speak to that. I think, as a former auditor, that's an important piece, that those are, administrative costs that they allow administrative overhead, to go to. I think it's all based on, true expense reimbursement though. Is that correct, Jeff? So through time and effort, showing that these are direct costs associated with, yeah. with ARP, which I know our time and effort system is one of those IT systems that needs to get upgraded. So I don't know if that would fall under this as well. But I would, definitely want to capture as many of those costs because they're true costs that, we're not going to be, are only because of ARP. So I'd like to get a, kind of an idea of what we think those costs really are. Commissioner French, I see you unmuted.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna basically echo what you were saying. The cost of monitoring this program and administering and everything is additional cost to the county and should be reimbursed through the program.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I think it's cleaner to do it that way and to accurately reflect the costs that go with it. And so, I mean, it's a federal program. I think it should be paid for by the federal dollars, not the local dollars.
Okay, so for those two categories, revenue replacement and administration, we'll start putting some, best guess dollars down for you guys to consider in the weeks ahead. And then before we start talking about some of the other categories, just more of a reminder to the board that after you pass the first plan, then staff will have to start creating the RFPs by category. And then we do need to come up with what that evaluation process is going to be. If you're funding mental health, we put out an RFP, we get 10, 15 organizations that reply to the RFP. Just asking you guys to start putting some thoughts around who and how the scoring of those RFPs will take place. And if you don't have feedback from me today, that's fine. Just wanted to kind of jog that memory, but I will pause here to see if you have direction at this point.
Commissioner Kearns?
I have a question. Is there a preferred number of individuals you would want to be a part of that?
It's completely open-ended.
Okay, so there was no guidance of 3, 5, 7, internal, external, as far as county employees or anything like that?
The guidance needs to be equitable in how it's scored. Like my understanding with the city of Spokane, I believe it'll be the team of 3 council members, since they can have 3 together without hitting open public meeting quorum things. And I believe some of their finance budget type staff will be doing that first review. And so what I've seen across the country, it really goes the bookends from internal staff to an external group. You don't have to have the same group that looks at each category. So you can do one-offs. Of course, the more complicated that gets is just an added factor. But yeah, it's pretty much the world is your oyster when it comes to this one.
And Jeff, do you know if some entities are doing it by, kind of by bucket? Or, I mean, it seems like you'd have different people, different experts, on mental health versus different experts on infrastructure. Instead of, I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, some groups are bringing in different groups by bucket. It seems to me the most common is an internal focus that at least does the legal review to make sure that the application's qualified, meets all the criteria. And then from there, it really ranges from it being the council or the board, the elected officials that are in charge of that jurisdiction, doing everything, to county or city or state staff. Bringing in an external group does not appear to be as common. And I think that's because a lot of the people that would be top of mind to bring in are also very likely to be possible applicants in their own right. And so you have that conflict that's possible. So we can talk more at a future date. Just wanted to put that one out there, bring it kind of bring it to the front burner for you guys to be thinking about. And then,
Yeah, I guess, Jeff, I would say, maybe, Scott, if you can think about that too, like if we do an internal group besides the commissioners, what would that look like versus, doing that initial double check and then it coming to the commissioners. I see pros and cons both ways. So I mean, I guess I just want to, have some ideas on different options.
Yep, we'll do that, because there probably isn't any best way or only one way to do it. There's a number of different approaches. So we'll give some thoughts to some different ideas for your consideration.
and now to get more just into the meat and bones of this. So, like we passed out at the COG meeting, the three of you have had for quite some time. We have that one page, it was the yellow sheet at the COG that goes through the 5 main buckets. And then within those 5 buckets, there's about 60 subcategories. Based on the people who've sent us ideas, my conversations with the three of you, I think I heard a lot of that echoed at the COG meeting and feedback. A lot of the feedback that we have received has been centered around infrastructure. And there is one full bucket with about a dozen subcategories around infrastructure. Another big chunk has been nonprofits. And while there is one category, 2.10, which is actually aid to nonprofit organizations, there are probably a dozen or more categories that nonprofits would apply. Like if you did something under mental health services or substance abuse or anything around social determinants of health, a lot of those would be buckets that nonprofits would be applying for, even if it's not in that category that has nonprofits in the title itself. And then the third large category that we've had a lot of feedback on is housing. Everything from capital projects of creating additional housing to, I know I've heard from the commissioners and at the COG meeting, interest in down payment assistance, getting people into home ownership, kind of as an equity issue, the generational wealth gap between those who accrue equity through home ownership versus those who may pay rent for big chunks of their adult life. So those are kind of 3 big categories that might encompass a dozen or more subcategories that kind of wanted to get some of your feedback on. Starting with infrastructure, of course, there's the water, sewer, septic, that whole clean water category of infrastructure, as well as broadband. There's the new rules also freed up a little bit more. It's still tough to do capital projects, but there are some additional capital projects beyond affordable housing that are now allowed within the rules, particularly if they're $1 million or less, which isn't a huge capital project, but there's some. Another one that we have received is our own county public health. There's that large capital project around fixing their building, which is allowed. Any sort of capital that is a physical plant that's being used in COVID-19 response qualified. And then just before you guys start talking about infrastructure can fall into different categories. So I've really been trying to reiterate over and over that we're not funding specific projects the way we did in CARES. We're funding categories and putting out RFPs. As in most things of life, there are exceptions to every rule. So within infrastructure, if the item or the project is really only available from a single source, such as sewer, stormwater, it's pretty much going to be the county doing the work. If it meets the criteria, that does allow us to do non-competitive procurement. So that is one exception that comes to that RFP process, depending on the infrastructure project. And if it is more there's really only one entity that would take it on, there could be some that would meet a a direct appropriation. Others would go through the regular RFP process. So with that, I know I've heard from some of you individually on some ideas in that category. I thought I would just throw it open at this point.
Commissioner French?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have one project that is time sensitive and wanted to bring before the board. I talked about it at the Council of Governments, and that is the West Terrace stormwater collection system rebuild. This falls under three categories: infrastructure, public safety, and housing. And as you're aware of the water and storm drainage system out there has all but failed. It has got water backing up on the streets, which then deteriorates the streets themselves and also jeopardizes the quality of housing in that area. Matt Ziracore, county engineer, did produce a report outlining a rebuild of that stormwater collection system for the West Terrace area that would not only fix the existing problems, but also lay a foundation for any additional housing that would come to that area. The dollar amount that he had on that report was $4.5 million. And that's an all-in number to my understanding and stuff. And so if we can give him go ahead, he can start the engineering and have that work under construction this year, which means that we would be able to avoid another year of deterioration to our roads out in the West Plains, at the Medical Lake interchange and stuff. So while we can't finalize it into a plan at this point, I would like to make a motion that we direct staff to include the West Plains Terrace or the West Terrace stormwater replacement proposal as presented by Matt Ziracore, so that he can have the confidence to be able to move forward. Well, I'll leave my motion at that point, and then I can speak to the nature of why this is time sensitive. If one of you can give me a second.
Can I ask what was the dollar amount again, Commissioner French?
$4.5 million.
Okay. I guess I'll look for clarification first. Jeff, is this, I mean, we've known about the situation out there. Have you looked into it? Does this qualify, or any concerns that this wouldn't be ARP eligible? I just want to kind of get those basic questions out of the way first.
Yeah, it definitely qualifies. And on our first pass, talking with our lawyers across the street here, we think that it's a high likelihood that this one is one that we could do a direct appropriation, as the county would be the only entity that would do this sort of work. We will need to do, follow up with that with the lawyers just to confirm, but that's a first pass as of an hour ago.
Okay.
And I have a clarifying question as well. Knowing that we're supposed to approve the plan first, is it okay? How does this work if we're approving this prior to a plan because the plan hasn't been approved?
In my view, you are letting me know that you want it to be in the first plan, that we are going to, hopefully you, the board, will be passing in the next few weeks. So my goal here is to collect whether it's a project like this that meets the non-competitive procurement standard, which are going to be far and few between, or if it is suggesting funding for a certain category. I'm trying to collect all that and put it together in a plan. So next week you guys can look at something that actually has some categories, projects, and dollar amounts in it, and get it built out. Of course, you guys could change your mind between now and a couple of weeks when we actually take a vote. But to me, it's no different than some other projects you talked about last fall during the budget process that you were hoping to fund through this category. It shows the political wills there as soon as the process catches up.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jeff, but didn't we also approve $1 million to go to VOA for their building acquisition and remodeling of the facility over by the community college?
You did that. There was a caveat because that was before we had a lot of detail around these dollars. So to me, there's a similar, you were signaling that the political will is there. That one does not qualify for non-competitive. So that one we will need to put it in an appropriate bucket, craft an RFP. And if they rise to the top, then we'll be able to fund it. If another group came and had a stronger application that gets to the same goals, we can't say we are definitely funding VOA. Because that one, unlike the West Terrace, which I believe at this point meets the non-competitive, VOA does not meet the non-competitive. There are many groups in the area that do housing projects. So similar variations on a theme, but that's another one that I plan to have next week when we start actually looking at some meat on the bones of the first draft plan.
Yeah, so my motion was not to actually approve it as part of the plan, but to demonstrate that political will to include it in the plan, primarily so that Matt can start the engineering on the project and be able to get it into construction this year and hopefully avoid another year's worth of deterioration to our county roads that are in that West Terrace area.
So if I could ask a clarifying question to Commissioner French. So I mean, essentially we're directing Matt Zarecor to move forward with a little more detailed plan of this project. I mean, I just gonna throw out a hypothetical. I mean, he could come back and say, you know, actually it's $20 million, and then we have to have a whole nother conversation. I mean, this is not allocating the dollars. This is directing Matt Zarecor to do a deeper dive in what would go into this project, correct?
Actually, if you read his report, he's done that deeper dive and he's done a lot of the preliminary engineering already to quantify that dollar amount. And I've challenged him a couple of times to make sure that, you know, the $4.5 million is going to cover all the cost. And he reassures me that he has enough money into that budget to cover it, all the cost, all inclusive at the 4.5.
Okay.
It's actually a very, very good report and very thorough.
And Josh, did you get the report? Because I don't know that I've seen the report.
Commissioner French, are you referring to the one, I mean, he came in, I mean, it was maybe 2 years ago. He came in and presented that one?
No, this is a report that he actually distributed about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, that identified the challenges that we have on the West Terrace neighborhood area, and then identified a plan to correct it, and actually quantified the plan with dollar amounts and stuff. So I can have him distribute that to you again. And so, like I say, it's a fresh plan. It's probably 30 to 60 days old at the max.
Okay.
I received it, I think, this calendar year. It did. I think I did get a copy of it just after the first of the year. But I can forward that to Commissioners Kearns and Cooney after this meeting.
Okay. Can I ask? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, because I'm just looking here under, you know, my email from Matt Zarecor, and I'm not seeing anything regarding that. So
I think it might have come from Chad Coles.
All right, so can I ask Commissioner French to state the motion again, just so I understand what it is?
So the motion was to direct staff to work to include the West Terrace stormwater collection system in the Arp plan for funding. So if there's a political will to include it in the plan, then I think Matt can then off of that commit the resources necessary to finish the design and get it out on the streets. And of course, by the time it's out on the streets, we have long adopted the plan.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll.
What I'm
I'll
trying to
second-
do is, I'm just trying to give Matt a couple weeks jump on it. Construction season is tight. If he can get it out on the street, we'd stand a better chance of getting good bids on it and taking advantage of a decent construction season. And like I say, avoid another winter that just tears the roads apart up there. Literally, the water goes out of the basements, pumps out in the street, ponds, then it creates an ice dam or ice lake, and people are sliding left and right on our county roads. But then the other thing is it breaks apart the asphalt, so the roads are literally falling apart.
Yeah, no, we hear about this a few times a year. In fact, we heard about it at the last steering committee of elected officials for Growth Management Act. So yeah, no, I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move this forward into our plan. Is that, I guess I just want to be clear, that it's getting put into the plan. It's not necessarily officially approved in the plan as of yet. Is that correct?
Well, the plan hasn't been brought forward yet, so we can't approve it for the plan, but it is to give one, political direction to Matt Zerocore to start the engineering so that when the plan is adopted, this will be included as part of it so that they knows that the project can move forward.
Okay, so question for me is I think kind of what Commissioner Kearns was alluding to, since we haven't seen the plan, the project that Matt has provided to you, I know I have not seen it, to ensure that it doesn't exceed a certain, I guess I would be happier to have it not exceed a certain amount, because I want to make sure we're not approving, something that as he starts to move forward with it, if it's a $10 million versus a $5 million.
I think we'll get a second. I was just gonna say, I would, and somebody correct me if I'm thinking of this the wrong way. I mean, we will get a second bite at this when the plan comes forward. I mean, when the plan comes forward, one of us could make a motion to remove that project from the plan before its adoption. This is to put it in the plan today to essentially reserve a spot for it in the plan, but we can always strike it from the plan if we, I don't see myself doing that, but we will get a second shot at this project when we adopt the plan as a whole, correct? Or do I have that wrong?
That is my understanding, yes. Like, based on what I've heard, this would be in the plan along with the revenue replacement formulaic. And what I've heard is a $4.5 million dollar amount. So if this were to pass, I would put in this plan with a description at up to $4.5 million amount, unless something changed, which would require
Would
you
you feel
guys
more
to
comfortable?
change it.
Would you feel more comfortable if I amended the motion to put a cap of $4.5 million on it?
Yes.
Okay, then I amend the motion to direct staff to work to include this in our initial plan up to $4.5 million to cover the cost of stormwater infrastructure at the West Terrace neighborhood.
I will second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion, amended motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. The amended motion passes unanimously. And then we're done, right? I don't have to do anything with the original motion, right?
No.
I think we're good.
Okay,
We're good.
just getting back into the, seat of having to like navigate all that.
Mhm.
Okay,
Are there
So I
any-
mean, I guess I'll throw, if we're throwing out projects, no, I did just want to just loop everybody back in. I mean, I've been in communication since we received the presentation a few months ago with Whitworth Water and their project, and I've been in communication with Jeff as well. It's, they have the project to kind of complete their loop with the water line to to increase pressure and efficiency for a great deal of residents in their service area. So I mean, I did want to just throw that out there, though they are still, that they would still like assistance with ARP. I think these are rough numbers. I think it was, I want to say it was a $7 million project, but they had secured 5 million through a loan. So they're just looking for that 2 million, roughly 2 million delta to complete that program. So that is something that ask is still out there. We don't have to take a vote today, but that is something that I would like to be considered and put in the plan if there's a way to do that. And I believe they had actually referenced, and I don't know, Jeff, this would be a question for you if the guidance had changed, but they had actually found some category in ARP that specifically spells out that type of project is specifically called out in the ARP legislation as as an acceptable and fundable project. Is that correct?
Yeah, I forget the title, but it's essentially a state clean water type program that they operate under. And if you're part of that state program, you are one of the enumerated. Yes, this definitely fits. It's 2.44 million is their request of ARP. And unless I guess in my view, unless I hear two people say I'm not interested, if somebody's put something out at this point, I would just add it to our first draft agenda, and you guys can always fine tweak when that comes before you.
Okay. I mean, I would like it included. I don't know if we need a motion or if I can just make that
I don't think
request.
you need a motion on each item. I understand Commissioner French wanted to show that for the timeliness. And so I think that was, appropriate for his West Plains thing. I don't think we need to do each one. To me, the vote is when you vote on that plan one would be
Okay.
the implementing vote for all the, whether it's a project or a funded category. I do believe the Whitworth Water is another one that might meet the non-competitive procurement threshold, because it is done by another separate unit of government, and they would be the only ones that would, pay for and do that sort of work. So that's something we'll look at with legal, whether that needs to go into a bucket that is competitive against other projects, or if it meets the threshold of a non-competitive procurement that you can fund directly.
Okay. Well, it's something I would request be included in the first plan if there's no opposition to that.
Well, if you're making a motion, I'll make a second.
What?
Well, then it's up to Mary to
and I
throw in
know-
a project and we're all good.
I know. So my small towns, we're going to be trying to meet with my small towns here as soon as possible. It hasn't happened yet. We're trying to get the small towns in South County together to see what their infrastructure needs are, to see what projects in my district might be coming forward. So at this point in time, I don't have a specific project, but I guess I would just like to, state amongst my commissioners that I would like to make sure that we're trying to be fairly equitable with some of these asks.
And one thing that I will do my best to bring out in the draft plan that of course I'll circulate and take feedback and change. To me, like these might be in infrastructure categories, but they're also a big part of housing. If you don't have this sort of infrastructure in place, you can't do economic development, you can't do housing. They all kind of work hand in glove in that regard. And we will we have to do kind of one paragraph write-ups on all of these. And Ron, while I'm thinking about it, Heather Arnold is online today. Erica had other things. You might promote her just in case she has some thoughts or ideas around any of this. And Tessa's also on for Gary Petrovich, who's out today. Are there any other infrastructure related projects, specific or category, that you would like to bring up today before we move forward to like nonprofits?
Yeah, so Jeff, before we move forward, I think my concern is hearing today new information on the revenue replacement. I mean, if that number is going to go from 10 million to 40 million, that changes how I look at the buckets, or how I think other people would look at those buckets. So I think I would ask that we really get a further clarification on that, before we really start identifying other buckets, because that's going to significantly impact, I think, what people might think of the other buckets. That's why, to me, it's like that revenue replacement and administrative, because I mean, is $1 million enough, or is that going to be too small? Those are two things that I think have a significant impact as we look at what, I know what I'm thinking of for other buckets. If suddenly, initially I was 10 million, in revenue replacement, if it's up to almost 40, then that changes my thoughts.
And my goal for next week is actually come with a PowerPoint slide or slides that will actually have, as you've seen the worksheets I've given you, numbers being plugged into different categories. Of course, we'll have revenue replacement and admin there, as well as the other 5, and get that more. I just wanted to go through these kind of conceptual questions before staff starts working on building the plan, to make sure we are moving the right direction. Since we do, unlike the city where they can get 3 council members together and have a discussion without triggering open public meeting, my one-on-one conversations with you guys only go so far, and then we need to have a broader conversation just to make sure you're all on enough of the same page that I can start crafting. Well, one other big, I guess it kind of falls under infrastructure, although it would be a different category, is the capital improvements on our public health building. That was a $4,073,000 ask under 5 different categories. There's technology, roof, windows, energy use, and ADA. And that's one that I've had several of you at least have questions about and comments when I've had individual discussions. Is that one you'd like to see more information on next week and kind of plugged into where it might go?
Because would it all fit under public health, or does it have to go under the different categories?
I believe all of it could go under 1.7, which is capital investments or physical plant changes to public facilities that respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So, because they all are physical plant changes and capital investments in that building. Looking at other ARP plans around the state and the country, I've certainly seen similar type projects for public health buildings. Not that what other jurisdictions do are necessarily meeting the letter of the law, time will tell, but it is something else that's out there, and it's something we can get some legal review on if there's interest in that. That's the other of the what I'd call infrastructure, regardless of what subcategory it goes into, that I had on my list for the 3 of you today.
Mr. French.
Yeah, so how does insulation, energy systems, replacing windows and doors tie back to being COVID related? Did somebody sneeze on them, or what happened?
Well, this particular category allows for physical plant changes and capital investments if the work in that building is COVID related. So it's not it's not limited just to the exam room where you get tested. It is a broader category allowing for the structural needs of a building that these people work in. So it's a somewhat broader category, but because it isn't that direct correlation, it is one I'd want to talk to our legal department on and make sure, maybe roof and windows doesn't qualify unless it's caving in, but maybe another portion of it does. But as we go through this process, I think we'll get kind of a system in place that works. But for these first categories, I didn't want to be asking our lawyers to do deep dives on issues if there's not any interest in doing it, even if it is allowed. But I've heard from each of you at least questions about the project, and so when I'm hearing something brought up by 2 or 3 of you, I thought we should bring it up in this forum to see if you want some more in-depth research done and legal analysis.
I mean, I guess for me, it's like, again, we just got the final guidance January 6th. So, I mean, a lot of the items that have come forward to us, I need to make sure that they all meet the criteria. So, yes, so I would want to make sure on this one that it meets the criteria for us to, be able to contemplate it.
Okay, so
Because
I
I don't
will,
want to get into an audit finding, where we have to pay money back for money we gave to somebody else. So that's.
then I'll work with legal to get a sense of which parts of that, if any, are qualified. Are there any other infrastructure projects that you guys would like to bring forward at this point?
I've got one. It's not a specific location or project like that. I mean, it's sort of a very broad, general way of using the dollars that the group that I was in at the COG we came up with, and kind of there was a lot of discussion about housing and housing availability, and one of the big things to that is the water and sewer. I mean, a lot of folks were going specifically to the category of disproportionately impacted communities and the affordable housing that was in that category. But, I think that there's certainly a nexus between that category and the infrastructure category while looking at water and sewer, because, not looking at any specific location, but within the urban growth area, finding large tracts of property that maybe don't have water and sewer hooked up to them. If these dollars could be used to bring that water and sewer to land that's within the UGA, which thus spurring the potential to develop housing on those properties by offsetting that large cost of water and sewer, that could spur additional housing in our community. So that was one of the ideas that the group that we came up with at the COG, was using the funds to bring water and sewer to undeveloped land that's already within the urban growth area.
I think that can definitely fit. I can see it fitting a couple different ways. One would be if it's a county project, then it could possibly go around the competitive requirement. Or if it's more, if your thought process is providing funds to offset some of these costs for a developer who's going to put in, some sort of affordable housing, whatever sort of housing it is to meet our housing needs. I think you could go either of those directions. But that's something I can look into and bring you back more info next week.
Okay. Thank you.
So Jeff, I think I've already shared with you the other infrastructure projects that I had proposed, and I think I mentioned them at the COG. the sewer line to the transload facility, the broadband expansion on the West Plains, the sewer and water line extensions to the SIA for a potential aerospace manufacturer. Those are all items that I think I've already shared with you and the cost associated with them, as well as a estimate of what it would cost to bring another source of water to the West Plains and not have to rely on the city of Spokane to support additional growth.
Okay, I'm happy to bring those in a more formal way for discussion next week. Just FYI, I did get a response from Chad Coles that as far as getting an estimate on a possible water, we're going to need to get some more questions answers back to him on that particular one.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Commissioner Cooney will work on getting some info from the small communities that you mentioned in South County. And is
Yes,
that
because
a
they
good?
definitely have potential water, sewer, and broadband issues down there that they're wanting to discuss. And their funding was very small for those little communities, but those are kind of those communities where you can start to do work, telework, that are opportunities for us for growth for people that are wanting to work from home.
We get broadband down there, it increases the area of possible housing stock for the region. And so I think this has been a good conversation around infrastructure, helping us to start frame possible ideas as well as what legally fits and start having those conversations. The other one, I guess, before nonprofit, since we've kind of had a housing conversation in intermixed with this, is around housing itself. One thing I heard at the COG, I've heard from commissioners, I believe the city included a part of a bucket around this is down payment assistance and some sort of housing program. That would be more of a bucket that we would fund, and then nonprofits or other groups would apply for an RFP. Additional thoughts or ideas around working on that category?
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the COG, working with the Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI, to create a category specifically for low-income housing assistance. I did have a brief conversation with Vicki Dalton, who's on the board for one of those CDFIs that has that in their mission statement. I've also talked to Habitat for Humanity, as well as Betsy Wilkerson over at the city of Spokane. I think they put in 2 million, and if we were to put in 2.5 or 3 million and make that a countywide program, so it'd be available to anybody throughout the county that met the economic thresholds, the qualifications. The beauty of a CDFI is that it also then becomes a great candidate for financial institutions in the market to invest their community reinvestment funds into. And that could grow the pool. And through that, we could actually have a revolving loan fund in the county that could continue on well after ARP is over, that would be a resource to help low-income, disadvantaged, and communities of color to get into housing ownership and start to work against the disparity in wealth between different parts of the community and stuff. So that's something that I think is very doable, and there are candidates in this community that can provide a very good package for us to consider.
Okay, I'll work on that. I had a good meeting with Councilwoman Betsy Wilkerson a couple weeks ago, and she had mentioned, Commissioner French, you guys had these discussions. I know something she's interested in possibly partnering on if the will is there to do it.
So Jeff, one of the questions is can we do a revolving fund? Because does it have to be expended by the end of 2026, and how do we make that work? So that's just one of the technical questions that I want to make sure that we get answered, because there's been thoughts about that for small businesses as well. And so I just want to make sure that we know that we can have we can put into a revolving fund from ARP dollars that, because ARP dollars you've got to allocate and then expend by 2026, and you're not expending those as they're coming back in. And if they're considering that rotation, that it's expended once, and as it comes back in, it's not considered, it doesn't hold that ARP, title to it. So that's just, Commissioner French, just one of the things I just want to make sure that we can move forward with that, because there's definitely some ideas on housing and small business, and all of that to help grow from an economic standpoint too. So one of the questions I just want to make sure we get answered is as we've got the new guidance.
Yeah, and so far, the new guidance, what I've read, I'm not all the way through it, but it's been silent on that. So I do think that's one we'll have to try to figure out an answer. It's not like you can just call Treasury and quickly get an answer. So don't have an answer on that, but it's definitely, we need to have the answer on that before moving forward. But we can certainly do something that's a 5-year fund. But beyond that, we'll need to have more information.
The way, and this is how we handled the other CDFI that I created back in the 1990s was you can set this up so that the CDFI provides the down payment as a second on the mortgage that is a non-amortizing second, so that it rides with the property until the property is sold. Then the second is paid off, goes back into the loan pool and can be reinvested back in the community and stuff. So meeting the threshold of the initial development or the initial investment, I think is going to be pretty easy to hit. And then it's just a matter of growing the loan pool. So, it worked that way in the other CDFI, and I'm pretty confident it'll work that way here in terms of being able to reinvest and, quite frankly, having a reliable source of assistance for low-income members of our community.
And just
Thank you.
A broad reminder, anything that doesn't fit in our 60+ categories, revenue replacement dollars are always an option that gives more flexibility. So just if the lawyers say no to something, that just means no to these 60 categories, and we always can take a second look through revenue replacement dollars.
Yeah. So it is 4:30, and I actually do have another appointment because I thought we were going to be done at 4:30. So as we can see, we have lots to talk about with ARP, and we need to definitely continue this conversation as we look to try to get a plan together. Commissioner French?
Yeah, there's one other item I wanted to bring forward as a miscellaneous item, and this came out of the steering committee of elected officials meeting last week, and that is getting a designated individual of Spokane County as part of the subcommittee on the countywide planning policies. As I mentioned in the steering committee, I've been through this twice before, and would certainly be willing to serve as the representative on that subcommittee if my fellow commissioners would support that appointment.
Do you need a motion or just head nods?
I think we need a motion because they were looking for appointments, and I think the only way we can make an appointment is to take a motion on it. And since it would be self-serving to appoint myself, I lead it up to Commissioner Kearns to take the task.
Yeah, I will move to appoint Commissioner Al French to the subcommittee of the steering committee of elected officials that will be dealing with the first draft of the countywide planning policies.
I will second that. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner French, you'll be on that steering committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other miscellaneous items that need to come before us until tomorrow? Seeing none, and I think tomorrow on the, we may have time tomorrow morning to continue. Well, I don't know if we can continue the discussion on ARP or I don't know, Jeff, you probably have enough to keep you busy for the next week to come back to us with
If you want to continue, that's fine. I think this has kind of given me some good direction and feedback. And even based on some of my individual conversations, I think I can bring you something next week that you guys can look at, unless you prefer to have more conversation tomorrow.
I think since we don't have it on the agenda, I would say let's bring it back next week, and really that way then it's a item on the agenda, and we can have a good discussion and think through the allocation of time that we need for it.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, with that,
Commissioner Keating, I'm looking at the calendar for tomorrow. Do we have a hard stop at 10? Is that why it's only scheduled for an hour, or was it just a light schedule?
It was just a light schedule tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Initially, I was going to be gone tomorrow afternoon to a WASAC AWC meeting, and that has been canceled. So that's why we were trying to push everything into the morning initially. So it just got canceled kind of at the end of last week because of COVID. So I apologize that that's why the calendars are a little funky tomorrow. Okay, with that, we will adjourn for the day. It is 4:34. I hope tomorrow morning when we re-adjourn that we will be I can be in the conference room and see what's going on the screen, and we won't have technical difficulties. So thank you all very much, and we will see you tomorrow.
Commissioners, thanks for the conversation.